Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, what of Labour? Its leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has been sceptical of the EU in the past. He voted to leave the European Economic Community in 1975. Times have changed, though. The party will campaign to stay in the EU. The Labour leader says it brings investment, jobs and protection for British workers and consumers. In a moment, we'll be talking to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Hilary Benn. But first, let's hear what Jeremy Corbyn had to say speaking in Wales yesterday.
We'll be campaigning to keep Britain in Europe in the coming referendum, regardless of David Cameron's tinkering, because it brings investment, jobs and protection for British workers and consumers. Labour believes the European Union is a vital framework for European trade and cooperation in the 21st century, and that a vote to remain is in the best interests of our people. But we want a progressive change in Europe to make the EU work for working people. That includes strengthening workers' rights, putting jobs and sustainable growth at the heart of EU economic policy, democratisation and greater accountability of institutions, and a halt, absolute halt, to the pressure to privatise public services by some elements in the European Union.
And the Shadow Foreign Secretary joins me now, Hilary Benn. Welcome. Did David Cameron secure a good deal? Did he get a good deal?
Well, look, he went through this whole process because of the splits within the Conservative Party. It hasn't changed our view. The Labour Party is in favour of remaining in the European Union. We were before he announced there was going to be a referendum and renegotiation, and we're still in favour. So it hasn't made any difference in that sense. But some of the changes, for example, the red card, we campaigned for that at the general election. And that is something that is, I think, good for Britain.
And that's the other, a red card on laws that the UK doesn't like.
So if you have a sufficient number of national parliaments in the EU member states saying, we don't really fancy this, I think that that is a good thing. The changes on child benefit, we believe in fair contribution. But this referendum is not, in the end, going to be about David Cameron's deal. It's going to be about whether we are better off in or out. And I thought it was really striking, listening to Chris Scaling a moment ago, he wasn't able to answer your perfectly fair questions about what trade relationships will replace the free access that we've got to the largest single market in the world because we're members of the European Union.
All right, let's go back to the deal. You say it won't make any difference, but you then do concede that actually introducing a red card, some sort of challenge to EU laws that the UK doesn't like, and restrictions on child benefit, even if they weren't exactly what the Prime Minister promised, they're good things. You support that?
Those are changes that we ourselves called for, but when it comes to this decision, it's about much, much more than that. And it hasn't changed Labour's view of the case for Britain remaining in the European Union because it's good for jobs and investment and growth. Let's take a very practical example. We export every day just under 2,000 cars to Europe with no tariff. When the Japanese and the Americans try and export to Europe, they have to pay a 10% tariff. That is what access to the single market means. It's why a lot of investment has come into Britain in the last decades, investing in the car industry, which is now growing and expanding. People thought it was on its way out. It isn't.
But there's no need to assume that that would disappear, as Chris Grayling has said.
Well,
why wouldn't we be able to secure that deal?
Guarantee it. None of those who are campaigning for leave can guarantee what the terms of access to that single market would be. And a lot of jobs, well-paid jobs, manufacturing jobs, high-skilled jobs, depend on that. Now,
they wouldn't go, though, would they, those jobs? And that is Project Fear, isn't it? By saying that, as Nick Clegg used to say repeatedly, that 3 million jobs would suddenly disappear. That's also not based in fact, is it?
I'm not saying 3 million jobs would suddenly disappear, but what is the alternative? Let's look at a good example. We've got Norway. Now, in order to get access to the single market, Norway has to pay a contribution, which is the same per capita as ours. They have to accept almost all of the rules. They have to accept free movement of workers.
But that's because the Norwegian establishment wanted that. I mean, to some extent, that would not be the deal that out ministers would negotiate.
Any say over the rules in Europe. Now, how is that an advantage, an improvement on what we've got now? The answer is it isn't. It's a worse deal. Even the Norwegians don't recommend that we go down that road. And that is why the Leave campaigners, as we've just seen with Chris Grayling's inability to answer your question, is they cannot tell us what out would look like. So why would we take the risk?
Are you saying that Britain just can't survive outside the EU. You're implying that this country couldn't do well on its own, that it couldn't survive, that you are scaremongering in that sense. That's what Brexit ministers are saying. The implication is that Britain couldn't secure a similar deal on similar terms, that this country isn't capable of being able to run its own affairs effectively.
No, I'm making a very different argument. It is this. We already have a lot of really good trade deals with other countries in the world precisely because we are part of the European Union, which gives us tariff-free access. We're part of the largest single market in the world. Why would you trade what we have at the moment, which is good deals, for the promise of deals that are just as good when those who are campaigning for leave cannot actually answer the question?
What about having control of your own borders? What about having control of your own borders? Are you happy with levels of net migration as they stand?
The thing about free movement in the European Union, it's part of the rules.
Right.
It is part of the rules.
So you are prepared to have limitless migration in that sense, because that's what it will be, over the next 5-10 years, bearing in mind what's happening in the world at the moment. It will be impossible to bring those levels down.
Well, what's happening in the world is a separate argument if you're talking about outside of the European Union.
Once those people are in the EU, get citizenship, then they will be able to come over to Britain, rightly or wrongly, but it is something that people are concerned about. So what I'm saying is being part of the EU does mean that this country cannot control its own borders and cannot control levels of migration.
Well, if you look at the number of people, for example, that Germany has taken in because of the crisis in Syria, now it will be a number of years before they can acquire German citizenship. What do I think? I don't think they're going to be then choosing in large numbers to move from Germany to the United Kingdom. Look at living standards and economic opportunities in Germany.
Okay.
But the other part of the equation, Joe, as you know, is there are many British people who are living and working in other European countries, and EU migrants who've come to Britain. They are working as nurses, they are working as lecturers, they are working in manufacturing, and they are paying into the British economy. They are net contributors, as you know, because they work and they pay tax, and that gives us more revenue as a country.
Did you agree with Jeremy Corbyn attacking the deal, attacking it particularly because of the break on benefits to EU migrants?
Well, our view on that is we believe in fair contribution.
Right. Well, Jeremy Corbyn said the deal is tinkering round the edges, particularly when the focus is on a break on benefits for EU migrants. He doesn't like it. Do you?
Well, no, we are agreed that fair contribution is the right approach. I think the British people...
Are you sure Jeremy Corbyn signed up to that?
We are agreed that fair contribution is the right approach. He was making a different argument. His argument was it is irrelevant to the view that Labour has taken about the benefits of being in the European Union. So it doesn't change our position in that sense. We're campaigning for in, Jeremy's campaigning for in, the whole of the Labour movement is.
So you'll share a platform with David Cameron?
No, I won't.
Why not?
Because we've got our own Labour campaign that's led by Alan Johnson, and we will talk to our supporters and encourage them to vote in favour of staying in. The Prime Minister can make his case to his party, which is bitterly divided, as we've seen over the last couple of days.
But he's very clear, and you've just said you pretty well sign up to the deal. It's not a bad deal. You agree on some of the individual points. You were always going to stay within the EU, some might argue backing the status quo. Why wouldn't you share a platform with the Prime Minister and David Cameron? Surely this is too big an issue to be partisan.
We make our own arguments in our own way to try and win the case, and the Prime Minister can do the same in his way with his party and the people that he is seeking to persuade. But in the end, the choice the British people will make is, are we better off? Are we safer? This is really important because, for example, the European arrest warrant. Now, in the last decade or so, 5,000 people who were suspected of crimes have been removed from the country to face justice elsewhere. And one of the bombers of the 21st of July failed bomb plot, who were trying to blow up Londoners for the second time in 2 weeks, fled to Italy, and he was returned to Britain to face justice and was convicted. Why? Because of the European arrest warrant. And these are very practical considerations that show that we're safer being in the European Union than we are if we leave.
And you feel very strongly about that and other issues that have persuaded you to campaign vociferously to remain in. So will you be throwing £5.5 million, which is the limit you can spend, at this campaign?
Well, we will be investing what we can in the campaign.
And what will that be?
But the most important thing is the arguments that you make. as you're kindly giving me the opportunity to do today.
It is and it isn't. As you know from campaigns in the past, you need money.
Of course you need money, but you cannot measure the fervour of the case for just by that. It's the arguments why it's better off for British people, protection of workers' rights. And the trade union movement...
But why won't you be spending the limit of money? Jeremy Corbyn doesn't want you to.
Look, the Labour Party, we've got lots of pressures on finance. The government, of course, is trying to undermine our finance. They're taking away short money, which they're using their position in the House of Commons to do.
But you have still got the funds to find £5.5 million.
The trade union movement, which is what Tory governments always do. And I tell you, one of the reasons why I think in the end, the British people will decide that it's the right thing to do, is this question of workers' rights. Because we have improved maternity and paternity leave, we have paid holidays, protection for agency and temporary workers, limits on working time. Now, those rights are guaranteed for all workers across Europe. And if we left, I wouldn't trust David Cameron to continue to protect those rights, because the other striking thing about the interview you've just done with Chris Grayling is he said, well, I don't like this health and safety legislation. Now, I don't regard health and safety legislation, which protects British people at work so they're safe when they're carrying out their jobs, as a burden. I think it is a good thing and we should support it.
All right, so you can't say just yet how much Labour will spend or how much you'd like Labour to spend. When's your next event with Jeremy Corbyn on this issue?
Well, we'll be discussing this package at the deal, the fact the referendum is now going to happen at the Shadow Cabinet on Tuesday morning. And of course, Jeremy will be responding to the Prime Minister in the House on Monday, when he'll be laying out the Labour case as to why it's right for the British people to vote to stay in, because it's best for them, best for the country, best for jobs, security, and indeed our influence in the world.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.